Hi, my name is Eleanor, as you know, and good evening to everyone. I don't know if you all know, but this is my last meeting with you. I am retiring from your committee after 3 years. I'd like to say that it's been my honor and pleasure to serve with all of you. You're wonderful. You have great ideas. You have great minds. And I learned a lot from you, and I expect to hear great things happening with this committee in the future. I want to say a special thank you to Alan and Roberta for all their help and the beautiful poinsettia that I got yesterday from Alan. I want to wish you all happy holidays and a very happy, healthy new year. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Eleanor. You're going to be staying tonight, right? You're joining us for the rest of the meeting?
I am. I couldn't hear that, dear.
You are going to join for the rest of the evening, right? You're staying tonight?
Oh, yes, I'm going to be here, certainly.
Okay, good. All right. Since we have a quorum, I'm going to officially call the December 2021 CPC meeting into order. It is 6:35. Per Governor Baker's order and Mayor Carditoni's order, we're doing the meeting virtually, and it is being recorded. And I want to start by taking attendance, but I can only see 4 people, and I know Eleanor is there, but I know there's more, and so there we go. That's yeah. Thank you. If you could turn on your cameras, that's really helpful for me.
If you'd like, I can call the attendance because I can see everybody who's listed.
Oh, that'd be great, Roberta. Thank you. Okay. Go for it.
Alan Bingham.
Yes.
David Turin.
Yes.
Heather Highmark. Are you having difficulty with your audio, Heather? We can come back to you. Heather?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
And Laura?
Yeah.
And Rebecca?
Yep, I'm here.
Tatiana?
Yep, I'm here too.
And we heard from Eleanor.
Yes.
Okay. So we're missing Jahan and Rose at this point.
Yeah, Jahan let me know that he's not going to be able to come today. And did I just interrupt someone else?
Yeah, this is Rose. Hi, I'm just on audio. I don't have my video.
Thanks. Yes, if you're on audio only, we can't see you on the list of attendees. So thank you, Rose.
Okay.
Okay, great. So we have quorum, and so now I'm just gonna check and see if there's anybody here who wants to make public comment. Open it up for that. Okay, so hearing none, I'm going to move it to agenda 2 and item number 2, which is officer elections. Roberta, do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. I will admit that this is my first time providing as a staff member with officer elections. So you can correct me if I don't have the process exactly correct, the way that you would do this. But I would ask if, would you like me to describe the roles, or do you just want me to ask if there are nominations for the chair and vice chair?
I can describe them.
Okay.
So I can help.
Okay. So the serving as the officer will be for a 1-year term, and the chair and the vice chair both work together with me throughout the month to check on the agenda and to discuss any questions or issues that come up throughout the month that are that may not need to come to the entire committee. So we may have the chance to make some offline discussions about CPC procedures and choices about some of the applications or decisions that are going to be in front of us. And as you know, the chair leads the meetings and the vice chair is prepared to step in if the chair is absent. And if the chair steps down, then the vice chair can step in to continue in that role. Anything else that would be helpful to know?
And this is open to appointed as well as members at large. Anyone
Yes.
in the committee. Yeah.
Anyone on the committee.
And as chair, often you might get asked to present at events like the ribbon cuttings. It doesn't have to be the chair that does that, but I've done that a few times now.
Yeah, you'll be offered, as chair, you'd be offered the first opportunity to speak at ribbon cuttings or other events, or to be the spokesperson for the CPC. And if you choose to pass that responsibility to delegate, you're always welcome to do that.
Right. And so I've been chair since January. I was vice chair, and then Jane Carbone had to leave Somerville and move from Somerville, so I had to step down from the committee altogether. Is what happened, because it's a residency requirement to serve on the committee. And I feel like it sort of, the job fell in my lap, and it's been fine. But my son started at the high school this year, and I know I want to sort of leave a little time and energy for that, meaning doing stuff at the high school. And so that's why I asked Roberta and to consider asking you all. It's, you know, because I'm going to stay on the committee, and my term is up technically at the end of this month, but one can take a second term without going through any nominations, and so I'll take it. But I asked Roberta to put election officers out there because I'd rather not be chair for the reason I just said.
Okay, so when we take nominations, happy to take nominations for other people, as although if you nominate someone else, they have the option, of course, to decline the invitation, or you can nominate yourself if you would be interested in fulfilling, in taking on that role.
Well, Heather, you and I have emailed a little bit back and forth. I don't know where you're at, but I would nominate you. I didn't know if you'd accept.
I would certainly do it if there was a need, if there was nobody, you know, if no one else is interested in doing it. I'm concerned about, I've just been very busy, so I've been concerned about time management. That's my one caveat. And we'll need a co-chair as well.
Right. Co-chair role seems very similar to me. And in fact, I was the co-chair for a while. It is very similar, except the co-chair winds up timekeeping and the chair winds up facilitating the meetings. To me, that's the big difference. And then the chair gets tapped first for those ribbon cuttings, but the co-chair can do them too. Differentiate a lot of the same. Other than that, they're quite similar. As Roberta explained, the co-chair and the chair both meet, you know, during the month to talk about things that come up, prep for this meeting every month, that kind of thing.
We can work together as a team.
Right.
So I guess I will accept the nomination for chair, and if there's no one else nominating, I don't know. Do you want to go on to the co-chair or?
would you like to nominate both positions and then vote? Or would you like to vote and then nominate the second position?
I think we
Oh,
just,
I guess
Go
I was
ahead.
thinking nominate both and vote on both.
Okay.
Is that?
This is Rose. I'd be happy to throw my hat into the ring for co-chair. I do still feel like I'm somewhat new, but I'm happy to do it if it would be helpful.
That's great.
great.
All right,
All right.
then.
Do we
And-
need to second the nominations?
I'm
Or-
sorry?
What is the procedure? Sorry that I haven't been through this before. Do you need to second the nominations before voting?
Oh, I'm
I
not
would
sure
assume
either.
so. I would assume so.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I can't do anything because I'm chair, right?
Well, this is Dave. I'll certainly second the nominations.
Both of them.
Yes.
Okay. All right, then somebody should make a motion to nominate Heather as chair and Rose as vice chair. But I can't do it.
Is-
I guess I will nominate them since I seconded it. So you need to nominate, seconding and nominating seems kind of redundant, but in any event, yeah.
Well, you're suggesting a motion. You're gonna make a motion that we nominate them.
So a motion that we appoint, not that we nominate them, they're our nominated, right? That we appoint them.
Right. That we appoint them, I'm sorry. Yes.
I
I've not
see
done this either.
Okay, I so motion.
I will second that.
All right. Then,
All right. And so then we just do the roll call and we're done. Heather?
she nodded.
Okay, that was a yes. Eleanor?
Yes.
Okay. And Tatiana?
Yes to both.
Yes, thank you. And Alan, he made the motion, so we don't have to vote. And Rose
Yes.
and Rebecca.
Yes.
Okay, and I get to vote even though, and I say yes. And so there we go.
Is that effective now?
They
Oh.
didn't have to announce their platforms or or anything.
If you were all competing for the position of chair, then yes, but sounds like the willingness to serve is the qualification.
I was assuming it was effective in the new year and for the next meeting is what I was
Okay.
assuming. But
Yeah.
that's what makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, I could just hand over the facilitation to Heather. That seems mean.
Yeah, you had prepared. All right.
Right. Okay, so then let's move on to approval of the meeting minutes. But first, let me say thank you. Thank you to folks for stepping up.
I have a question of just about process. I don't see that I've received an email or anything with the agenda or with any notes. Who would that have come from? Was that from Roberta or would it have come from someone else?
That would have come from me. You should have received, did I send?
No.
Did I not send the packet to everyone?
No, I didn't get
I
it.
didn't see it.
I didn't either.
Oh,
I
okay,
just
good.
thought this was a very
Okay.
short meeting, honestly.
I may have just neglected to send you all the packet. So I'm going to take a moment and email you the packet right now, and my profound apologies for not sending that to you in advance. So I think you may want to postpone the approval of the meeting minutes until the next meeting, since no one has had the chance to read them, unless you want to.
Right. Oh, gosh. Okay, fair enough.
Okay, but I will send this, I'll take a moment to send this to you anyway, because it may be that as we talk about the items that come up, that you want to be able to look at them on your own.
Right. Right, that makes sense. Okay, so if we get the meeting minutes, then the next thing is the review of the Glen Park community recommendations with the PSUF.
Yes, so and there is a memorandum explaining, and within the meeting packet, there's a memorandum. So I will open that and share the screen so that we can read the memorandum together.
Great.
Okay.
And in your meeting packet is also a letter from a member of the public regarding the community gardens. So I can read both of those with you. Are you able to see the letter on my screen right now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So it says, dear members of the Community Preservation Committee, I'm writing to thank you for voting to fund the 5 Palmer Ave Glen Street Park project and to ask you to reconsider the conditions that were placed on the project. Unfortunately, I was away during the meeting and our Public Space and Urban Forestry Division ex officio member Rebecca McKevitz has just joined the city's team and could not possibly know the background of this application. Additionally, since the purchase of the parcel in 2017, there are no members of the CPC or a CPC manager that was involved in the conversations that took place then. Our 2016 through 2023 Open Space and Recreation Plan shows that the community gardens are one of the city's areas of need. It was based on this data, the public process for writing this plan, and consistent feedback in both surveys and community meetings that the CPC approached the buying of 5 Palmer Lot in 2017. It was also with the CPC's past intent, community feedback data, and PSUF's belief that based on the size, location, orientation, and adjacent uses of the site, the best use for the space is indeed the expansion of the community garden plots, that we wrote an application requesting $210,000 for this project. The budget and application you voted on was based on creating community gardens because we consistently hear from community members, many of whom do not have backyards, that community gardens are important and needed. We request that the committee reconsider the condition requiring additional public process about the use of the site. We will, of course, be having community meetings about the design of the project, as we always do. On this site or any other, it is possible that in order to comply with the American with Disabilities Act, accessible parking may be required on site. The conceptual plan included in the application, which is merely conceptual, showed this because we are planning to include ADA plots. While PSUF is committed to the maximization of green space and a parking space on site may not be required, the city must follow ADA laws and any condition which could interfere with doing so is invalid. We ask that you please reconsider this condition as well. PSUF understands that the current state of Somerville's community garden program is complex, and we fully support changes that may be needed to the management of this program that may be made to the management of this program through the Conservation Commission, which has purview over it. We are also aware that members of the CONSCOM have varying opinions on the merits and management of the community gardens. I have reached out to the CONSCOM to offer PSUF assistance on building consensus among the commissioners and a better program that focuses on access and equity. However, the issues with the present community garden program management do not negate the need for places where residents can garden alongside their neighbors. Community garden plots have been and continue to be advocated for in our public processes around public space. Thank you for your consideration. And Luisa Oliveira is here this evening to talk with the committee about this petition.
Okay.
Did you say there was also a letter? Was that
There
also?
is a
That was-
letter, yes, I'll share that on the screen as well. Let me see, can you see the letter?
Well, yeah, small, but we can't see it.
Oh, it hasn't opened, that's why.
Thank you.
So the letter says, Dear Concom, the gardeners here at Glen Park Community Garden are thankful for your consideration to convert 5 Palmer Ave into an extension of the Franklin Street section of the Glen Park Community Garden. We look forward to assisting you any way possible to make this happen. We understand there are some amendments to the original proposal, one being the process of community meetings to get community input regarding other options for the space. We value Concom's commitment to open space here in Somerville. Please know allowing more spaces for gardening in this area will be well used. Gardening has never been in higher demand. It is good for the neighborhood, good for the land, good for the body, and good for the soul. Less paved surfaces, more permeable green space. While we also have a wait list for our plots, it is much smaller than many others. This is because there is a solid process for removing absent gardeners and because of natural turnovers. I personally have handed out many infraction notices and have asked over a dozen gardeners to leave. Most know they are not honoring their agreement and leave on their own after being prompted. Turnovers are due many reasons like new jobs and family changes, moving out of Somerville, rent increases, COVID, and so on. Some just take on more than they can handle. While we do have long-term gardeners, we also normally introduce about 4 to 6 new gardeners every season. The city's combined wait list looks bigger than it really is because hopeful gardeners put their name on multiple garden lists, often taking the first plot that opens up. Many of us really don't have green space to garden in. It's a great way to safely socialize outdoors on occasion, especially during COVID. We hope you understand our many reasons to expand the gardens. We are really not aware of another group's interest in putting something else there. It's currently an unofficial dog park that is not maintained. I love dogs, but not next to community garden. We have also asked the police to do drive-bys to become aware of a homeless person living there next to an early education center and a well-used park used by athletes and young children. Gardens would be a great use of that space. Please keep us informed of community meetings and input. We are happy to assist in the process.
Okay, thank you.
And Louisa, did you want to speak to any of this, or you're just here for questions tonight?
I'm here really for either, and I have to really apologize for not being able to be at the last meeting. Normally, and also I have to be honest, I did not think that this would be an issue given the past and the background. I was on the committee when the property was purchased, and I know that Michael Fager, who is the chair of the Conservation Commission, was also on the committee. I know that there's a lot of debate within the Conservation Commission, who has purview of the community gardens, about this issue that they have not settled and kind of need to. But I wanted to just ask you to reconsider those 2 points because of what I outlined in the memo, and to also understand that this application was written with that program. So it is for $210,000, which is the amount that we estimated would be for creating a public community garden. So changing the program changes the application completely. I think if, I don't know if you're able to vote on it again, because one option is to just vote yay or nay, but I would like to ask you to either reword or remove those conditions. My understanding from watching the meeting is that there was some debate about adding, if possible, on the condition about ADA. That would be perfect for us because, again, if possible, we also don't want to put a parking lot there, a parking space, but we can't add a condition that could prevent us from following ADA law. So the if possible kind of saves us on that. And then secondarily, I do really think that there is a need for community gardens. There are problems with the community garden program. We've tried to prompt the CONSCOM on numerous occasions to work with us to deal with them. I think this is kind of helping them get there. But especially that is probably the best run community garden in the city. And there has always been a need for more plots, and that's always what we've heard from the beginning of purchasing that plot and tearing down the building. So I just wanted to provide that background because I know that none of you had it, and Rebecca couldn't possibly have it. So I'm happy to answer any of the questions that you may have.
If I may, Madam Chairperson.
Yep.
Louisa, hi, this is Alan Bingham. We know each other. I was one that actually came up with the thought that this should be part of a community process so the community could buy in as to what was the best use of this land, whether it was going to be a passive and active park or some form of park because it is under the open space, or a community garden, because this should be really a public community process. And I think the way that we'd discussed it, if you go back over the minutes and go back over the audio, is that we were looking at this to be not excluding the concept of a garden, community garden, but ensuring that the community garden is really what the citizens want. The other part of that came up was about parking on green space. You know, the city owns the roads. So it would seem to me when I suggested this that the use of green space for parking is a waste of green space. And if the city owns the roads, and looking at the map, the proximity of the space to the road could be designated a handicap parking area, which would comply with largely, I believe, with the ADA requirements. I would have to check on that, but I think that was the essence of what we were looking at, as I recall it, just to make sure that green space doesn't get used for car parking, which becomes a selfish person use, and instead it should be used for the community. So I just wanted to clarify that because I think it's important for you to understand it, because as you said, you were not at last month's meeting.
Thank you, Ellen. I was not, but I did watch the audio. I did watch the meeting, so I'm aware of what the intentions were in the conversation that was had. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So to Alan's point, can on-street handicap parking compensate for handicap parking on the green space?
So we don't know that because we haven't started designing. And the point that I'm making is that a condition cannot dictate where parking will be or not be when we have to follow the ADA law. So it's very likely that can happen, but that should not be a condition. You can't make no one can make a condition that says you have to do this if in order to follow the law you have to do that. So that's my caution there is if you want to stay,
I don't think there's a debate. Yeah, I don't think there's a debate that it has to be ADA compliant. I don't think, and I think as you heard, I think that the idea, we certainly were, I think my recollection is, although I didn't, go through the text or the, was that our conversations were in the context of, if possible, or, our goal would be to avoid that. If it wasn't,
that's not the condition as it was written.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking you to reconsider.
So I don't have a problem with us clarifying. I don't know what the mechanism would be, because I'm new to this, but I don't have a problem with us clarifying, that we intended the clause, if possible, to be, in there.
Which I thought it was in there. Go ahead, Roberta.
So, two things. First of all, I'm going to share the screen again so that you can see the actual decision with the conditions that the committee voted on last month. And my suggestion is that the committee can vote to amend its decision this evening to, and the choices that are that you could choose from would be to amend these conditions or to decline the funding, or to accept the funding without conditions. So you can amend this recommendation that you voted on last month in any of these directions.
So I think on a if they were to be amended, the two main points that that the city is looking at adjusting is softening the parking language and this issue about the community meetings regarding alternative uses. That you would like to be able to proceed with the fact that this is a discrete budget that was designed for designing a community garden on this site, implementing the community garden. And I believe in your letter, or at least the intent that you're sort of putting forward, is that that process has already happened, that that's already been a determined and identified need, and that it's sort of redundant and not in the current budget. The idea of going back to the community, confirming that as the preferred use. So, I mean, I think, you know, in my experience with designing community gardens and with ADA requirements, I think you can definitely have on-street parking that would satisfy that, or I don't know how far away that existing lot is, but I think we could soften it if we want to. I believe we originally had it softer and then decided to make it more hardwired because we wanted to really kind of say, no, we don't want to have the parking. We don't want to have parking on site. So that was something that sort of evolved during our conversation to be even more explicit. So that's really the 2 points that we're looking at softening. Is it correct? Yeah.
Well, these are the 2 points that were brought up by city staff in both those communications.
Mm-hmm. So in my mind, I feel that I am okay with softening the thing about the process and proceeding with it as a community garden. I do feel that it's a very dense neighborhood full of multifamily homes, and that there is a need for community gardens, and that having more gardeners on the site is often a way to kind of inhabit and make a place safe, and you have kids and families there. I don't see it as a I feel like if they've already sort of vetted that issue and deemed that as the best use, I'm okay with sort of supporting that as a community garden. The associated parking, I'm interested in hearing people's thoughts about that.
If I may, through the chair, Heather, I take your points. I don't understand why there's a reluctance for a community meeting to decide on what the best use of this is for the citizens. If the city makes a decision that this should be community garden, then you know, that's one thing. But I think really there's no reason why there couldn't be a community meeting to decide this. If the citizens decide that along the line that then, well, yes, this is a good use in the garden. The issue I see is that a community garden is somewhere which is invariably fenced out, limiting access, and it only has a limited usability of, say, 7-8 months of the year, whereas a normal park would have 12 months around use, more likely. Probably not 12, probably 10. So I don't understand why there's a reluctance for a community meeting for this. So I think that's one issue. If it is indeed the citizens' will for a community garden, so be it. And as far as the associated parking for ADA and MAAB regulations and requirements, I think that has to be considered in all the construction plans, always. And we have to look after people. But if that parking can be placed on the street, that does provide more of the open space. And this was an open space issue. Thank you.
Louisa, did you have your hand up?
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to answer Alan's first point because there is a misunderstanding here. There was community process around the open space plan, which you have a link to, and I would recommend that folks review that, because I know in past, and I'm happy to come and do this again, but in past commissions, we did have a little presentation explaining kind of what our open space data is based on and what decisions are based on and how acquisition happens. So happy to do that again. But there was community process. It was always discussed as this. And as you can tell from the letter and from other, every community process that we have, there are active community gardeners. It makes only sense to expand a community garden here where there is one already. So we could have another meeting, but frankly, it's redundant. We've done it already. We could have another meeting. The 35 gardeners who are nearby will come and say, we want a community garden. So this process has already happened. That's why we wrote the application for this program of the space.
Thank you for that. Other comments or questions around this?
Hi, Tatiana here. I just have one question because I'll admit maybe I missed something when I was reviewing the project. I sort of understood that the parking as it was sort of already, if not completely settled. It was, the design was maybe, a couple of reviews away from being set, and that the parking incorporated into the open space was almost like fait accompli. If I'm understanding everything now correctly, it is not in fact, it is not set. It is something that is going to have to be reviewed further by the city, and what the current design and current plan that we're seeing, it could shift to street parking, it could not. That is just, that's more up in the air, I guess. That sounds weird, but, and if that's the case, I'm very much fine with switching over to if possible, because frankly, we can't demand anybody actually break ADA laws. It's kind of not, yeah, anyway, that's what I've got.
Just to clarify for Tatiana, the process of design and the community process around this parcel, around this particular project, has not yet happened. So the next step is that we will go to the community. We will show them this design. We can do iterations of other ones. We'll look at the parking, and then they will decide which is better, which is not. We will discuss the merits of any plan that we come up with. And then, as is in the application, we are hiring a designer to do the construction documents on this. So it is not at all finalized, and we are happy to consider removing that, looking at where that parking space can be. The intent was really to show that we are making a move towards creating ADA plots, because we don't have many of them in the city.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. Other thoughts on this? Other comments?
This is Rose here, and I just, in terms of the community process, I feel like if that community process was already done, there's not from my perspective, there's not a need to redo it. Although I do think, Louisa, it's what you said about doing as you've done in the past. That would be great if there could be a way that we would see a little blurb about that process, or I don't know, a consolidated presentation or something, just for future similar situations.
Thanks for that, Rose. Others?
Hi, this is Dave. Hi, Louisa. I'm trying to understand, the very last thing you said, I thought was that there still were going to be community meetings about the design of the of the community garden. Those would be for the entire community or just for the garden?
No, they would be for the entire community. So imagine if we said we're going to build a playground and we had community process around building a playground. The community is gathering there to talk about the amenities included in a playground. Where you're trying to change the program, that is not the application that we wrote. We didn't write an application to design a playground. We wrote an application to design a community garden. Based on the data and public process that happened, and based on purchasing this, and it has taken this long to get to where we are. We purchased it in 2017. So what I'm saying is that you're asking us to do a process around the program of the land. We are going to do a process around designing a community garden.
And besides it having been included in the kind of the open space plan you referred to, and the stated need for just more garden plots generally across the city, was there a public process about whether this parcel specifically should become a public garden versus becoming part of the park?
The parcel was purchased with that intent, and the conversations that we had in the CPC at that time made that very clear. Michael Fager was in the CPC. He can verify that as well.
And I remember when it came before the Conservation Commission.
That's right.
And,
So
and in that context, one of the things that I requested was how was the decision made to make it community garden instead of park? And then there wasn't really a clear answer. And I suggested that a caveat to it should be that there should be that whatever public participation process the city would normally do in this sort of a transaction should occur here. And it's not clear to me still that that ever happened.
So I don't know what more I can describe in how we got to where we are. I guess my answer is that this is the application that is before you. I've kind of asked and explained the reasons why we would like you to reconsider the conditions.
Yeah. So my perspective, though, is that we're being asked to spend $210,000, that money that's supposed to be allocated to open space and recreation, for a use that'll really serve a very small number of people, no matter how avid they may be at gardening, and no matter how dear the gardening need may be. But it'll serve 15 additional people, not the hundreds of people that perhaps would be served by more parkland.
And what I would say to that, David, is that that opinion is your opinion. There are others who have differing opinions, and that is a larger conversation about community gardens that needs to happen in the Conservation Commission.
Right, and that's exactly why we conditioned the approval the way we did, is to have that conversation, not to put our decision over that, but to say, we'd like the larger community to have an opportunity to say, do we want this to be more public, community garden, or do we want it to be more Glen Park?
But as you know, the community garden program is governed by the Conservation Commission. So it has to be the commissioners that say, we would like to have a process to reconsider the community garden program.
In my experience, that's not how it works. The city comes to us and says, here's a new community garden, manage it. They don't ask us if we want this to be a community garden.
Yeah, I think this is a conversation we need to have within the Conservation Commission, and it has to do with how Conservation Commission got purview over the community garden program, which is simply that the community gardens were started by the person who was the Conservation Commission chair, and now they have historically had purview over the rules and how they are governed. And
not the establishment of a community garden.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Not the establishment of a community garden. The city does that.
Yes, the city does that, but the CONSCOM has historically always supported us doing that because the CONSCOM governs the community garden.
Well, this proposal is not before the Conservation Commission. It's before the CPC.
That's correct. And you are all welcome to vote on it.
Okay. Roberta, something I think that would be helpful to me is if you could put back on the screen that the conditions that we had up, and just so we can think about it for a sec again. Would you mind?
find those conditions, make sure that they're front on the screen.
Because I think as a committee, we have to decide to do one of the three things that Roberta suggested at this point, which
And
is,
just to reiterate, that was to amend the condition, to eliminate the conditions, or to decline to fund the project.
I have another question for Louisa. Louisa, for the board members who would like to be kind of assured that there was a community process and that the community settled on this as the best use, is it possible to point to meeting minutes or some sort of record document that would, back that up?
So the community meetings that were had were the community meetings that were had both with gardeners and with general public, called green spaces and community places. We do not have video of those or minutes, but we have presentations where there were different groups that were focusing on gardening. From this meeting and from the data that we have by surveying all of the community gardeners and knowing how many community garden plots we have, we identified goals in the open space plan, one of which was to increase the amount of community gardens. It was with this data and this process that we purchased this land through the CPC. So there wasn't any like one, hey, we're gonna buy this piece here. Do you want to have a community garden, or do you want to have a Ferris wheel? That it wasn't that type of process. It was a larger community process. And it only, I mean, from a site perspective, it is what makes the most sense. It's not a very big parcel. It's not big enough for a lot of uses other than, as the gardener said, a dog park. And so that's where all of this has come from. And that's the why it was purchased and why this application is before you for the 210.
okay, thank you.
Well, I certainly, I can lean towards supporting it as a community garden, and I feel there's a couple reasons why. Is that there is a need. It is a dense neighborhood full of a lot of multifamilies, and there's already a successful, well-run community garden there that we are sort of expanding. And it's a small spot. It's not a huge spot. So, I mean, you could make the argument over any special use space that you're sort of designating it, a dog park's for dog users and a soccer field's for soccer players. I mean, you could go down that rabbit hole, but the thing is, it populates people in the park. It brings them there on a regular basis, and it makes for community and safety. And I could support that, and I could support saying, under the parking, we could say associated parking will not be located on the project site unless proven otherwise, or something, something that or if possible seems very weak, but maybe we can find another way of kind of providing a loophole there as they do their studies, if it's deemed that.
Again, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Heather, but I do want to reiterate, we're not about making parking spaces in green space. This was a conceptual design that was shown in that way because of adding the ADA plots. So we are 100% hear what you are saying. However you want to put the language is fine. But our intent was not and is not to say this is going to be for a car.
Thank you, Louisa. That's good to know, but all we had to work on was the designs that were given to us.
Right. We could change the language to something like the ESUF or project managers will do everything to find parking else on the street And that would be, the parking spot on site is like a last, what's that called?
Last resort.
Last resort, thank you. Yeah, that's the last resort.
This follows on from the bullet point above it that talks about the need to comply with MAAB and ADA. So that bullet point could be changed to say to meet any ADA and or MAAB requirement, on-street parking will be preferred rather than on-site parking.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I'm still sharing. I'm trying to open the editable version of this document so that I can
Okay.
change it in live time. I'm getting used to how GoToMeeting works, but it's still.
Okay.
It's amazing, after 18 months, we still haven't mastered this.
I know. Well, it's been 6 months for me for GoToMeeting. I haven't, I'm not used to this program.
What I find interesting about the handicap parking issue is that this is assuming this is a local community garden, which I believe it is because you're talking about the local 35 gardeners, Louisa. It seems to me they probably wouldn't be driving there anyway. So I'm not sure. It's just to meet the MAAB, I presume.
Hi,
I
Alan.
can't
And
imagine
sorry.
people that weren't local using it.
We don't know if people would be driving. If they have a disability where they cannot walk, they may need to drive.
Also, hi, Tatiana here. Sorry, to interject. I am obviously, I don't have Louisa's background here, but I do have friends and roommates with community gardens. And local can be a little bit of a flexible term, depending, it could be as much as a mile away. And if you've got a disability that makes sustained walking, particularly in the summer when it's, hot or, a car becomes much more necessary than it might be for someone who is completely able-bodied. That's all I was going to say.
I fully appreciate that point. I've worked all my career in healthcare, so I fully appreciate that and take it. In fact, my spouse has an ambulatory disability, so I take it quite well and understand that. I was just looking at the concept of a local community garden, and people actually getting in a car to drive 2 houses down type of thing. Anyway,
So
I still think we should have more handicap parking.
I've just taken, I believe the suggestion that was last made, I reworded this condition to read, any associated parking will not be located on the project site unless necessary to meet ADA requirements.
Make
Is
that ADA and MAAB.
ADA requirement.
MAAB is the Massachusetts reg.
Yeah.
Well, it is going to be necessary. I mean, maybe the wording is more unless.
Well, it won't be located on the project site unless necessary to meet ADA and MAAB requirements. So preferably you can find a way to meet the requirements with a parking space located off of the site. That's the goal.
That works.
Okay.
Heather, it sounded like I wonder if you're able or willing to make a motion, because I'm not sure how others are feeling, but I got the sense that you were okay with the conditions that we have retagged here, the amended ones, with the one amendment, I should say.
I guess sort of I'd like to make a motion to consider amending the language, and we could just start there, that general. Does that pass? Are people open to the idea of amending the language, the conditions?
Yeah, I think from a procedural point of view, that's the best way to go, and make it so that it's about the funding conditions as itemized in bullet point 2.
Actually,
Okay. So was that, Heather, did you just make that motion?
Well, I didn't hear anyone oppose it, so
Okay.
so I guess then we could propose specific language.
Okay.
So to amend bullet point number 2 to read, any associated parking will not be located on the project site. I'm trying to think.
Unless necessary to meet ADA and MAAB requirements.
Or you could
Okay.
say except, except as necessary, to meet.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
nice, David.
So I propose to change bullet point number 2 to say any associated parking will not be located on the project site except as necessary to meet ADA and MAAB requirements.
I will second that.
Okay. That was Alan, right? Okay. Eleanor?
Yes.
Tatiana?
Yes.
Okay. And Rose?
Yes.
And Rebecca?
Yes.
And David?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do we also need to discuss the third bullet point? Or are we good with this as is?
Well, I think we've been asked to revise the third bullet point
Right.
in order to focus their time and energy on designing a community garden. So
Right. That's a good point.
so I think we either strike the line altogether or we amend the line.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have a strong preference? I mean, the application states that there'll be community process over during the final design of the garden. So that does not have to be a condition. It's already in the application.
Right. Seems like the issue that folks are having with that bullet point is that it's kind of going to reopen up the process. It's almost, and make it almost like a little step backwards, right? Because if they open it up and then people say, oh no, not a community garden, we want X, Y, or Z, that really does almost negate all the work that's happened to this point, up until this point. I mean,
Well, the parcel wasn't purchased and the grant wasn't written for a kind of visioning plan. It was written to develop and construct a community garden. So they're
True.
saying that it's not what they put the grant in for. So I think it's easiest to strike the line altogether since they have community process in their application for the design process.
yeah, it's definitely easiest, and I think if we do that, we're kind of just trusting that the process was transparent and open enough leading up to that point. I mean, I wasn't around back then, like none of us were, right? So maybe Louisa, were you? Yeah.
I've been here for 10 years. I was here.
Yeah.
Louisa,
So-
can you point to a discussion of this that you referred to in the open space and recreation plan?
Yeah, so if you go to the back of the open space and recreation plan, there's a number of appendices, and there's a green places community green spaces, community places process that happened. That's how we got a lot of the data that identified our needs for open space. Again, fields, community gardens were things that we consistently heard. And you can see the processes. I think we had 4 meetings all throughout the city. Again, it was with that data that we seized the opportunity to buy this land and then convert it.
And this is in the 2016 to 2023 report?
Yes. Yep.
I'm looking
It's
at
the
it
link.
online. You have a page number?
No.
What page at 285, or it was appendix? You said it was one of the appendices?
Yes, it's in the appendices, and it's if you search for green places, green spaces, community places. Or I think there's an entire chapter on community process as well. The link to it is in the memo that I sent.
I think, I don't know if we're ready to, I'll make the motion and then we can decide when we're ready to vote, but I'll make the motion to strike it completely. The third bullet point completely. And folks can, when we're voting, just to remind you, you can always abstain if you'd like to kind of register. If you'd like to go on the books as abstaining, that is an option.
You can also vote no.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone's trying to get to consensus, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
This is Rose. I'll second the motion.
great. Okay, Eleanor?
Yes.
Okay, Tatiana? Tatiana?
Sorry, audio went a little fuzzy for a minute. Could you, I'm not sure I quite heard exactly what we're voting on. We're voting to strike the language from the, from what we passed
Right.
last month?
The third bullet point, stipulating that they have community meetings.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I will go yes on that. Thank you. I wasn't 100% sure what we were saying for a moment. Thanks.
Sure. Alan?
Yes.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Yes.
And David?
No.
Okay. And I'll say yes. And it passes. All right. Next we had Q&A with the Affordable Housing Trust.
So unfortunately, the Affordable Housing Trust have asked if we would be willing to, or have requested that we put them on the agenda for January instead of this meeting, to give them some more time to prepare responses to the questions. Thank you to everybody who did submit questions to me today. So they'll have those questions and more time to prepare to respond to them next month.
Okay.
thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa.
Thank you for coming, Lisa.
Yeah. Okay. Then next on the agenda is next steps for the 1783 Adams Magoon House.
Yes, so again, my apologies to everyone. Ideally, you would have had time to review the materials that I prepared for you in advance, but didn't send you the link for. So I am trying to open the memorandum. So last fall, when we, when the applications were due, I retained the services of the city's on-call historic preservation consultant to help the applicant to provide just a very general assessment of the needs of the project, to help her develop a scope and to obtain an estimate from a qualified contractor who would be able to do the project so that it could meet Secretary of Interior standards. So Eric Dre worked with us to work with the applicant to prepare this this general assessment. And the conclusions that he came to are the reason why this application was ultimately canceled for the general funding round in the fall, which is that we essentially need more information than is currently available to be able to develop a specific budget for the project. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping to have the correct file open. So there's a brief memorandum that he's provided that describes the conditions of the property. I'm not going to read the entire memorandum out loud, but I'm going to find the most applicable statements that he makes to explain the situation that the house is in currently. So the current conditions, the windows, the majority of the original wood windows were replaced post 1986 with windows that either have no muntin divisions or had interior applied muntins that have been removed. On the front and side elevations of the main block, the original windows were set in projecting frames, sometimes an indication of plank construction as opposed to later balloon frame construction. When the new windows were installed, the fit was not exact. The openings appear to have been framed down and/or wood blocking was added to fill in gaps from the replacement sash. As a result, the existing replacement windows both fail to replicate the original muntin patterns and are a great source of water and air infiltration. The application calls for the removal of the replacement windows and restoration of original wood, single glazed windows with a 9/6 muntin pattern, a few with 6/6 muntin pattern. This application adheres to the Secretary of Interior standards. Standard 6 is the applicable standard. And he highlights the sentence, replacement of missing features shall be substantiated by documentary, physical, or pictorial evidence. So that's indeed what this application was going to ask for. And there are photos that show the what the original, or certainly quite old, he points out, windows that were in place. And existing photos that we have of the building. I just want to skip the issues and concerns are what I wanted to highlight for you this evening. So the applicant did obtain an estimate, which I've provided also in the meeting packet that you can peruse after this meeting, or I could pull it up to see just the total amount that was included. While that opens. Okay. The Minuteman proposal calls for the replacement of 25 windows, which does not cover any of the windows on the left side rear elevation, which has been substantially altered. And he's provided some photographs. I think this is the side that he's referring to that their proposal doesn't include. The Minuteman proposal, excuse me, includes the following exclusion. We anticipate finding extensive rot and likely structural damage. all of this has been excluded from our pricing. This could add a substantial additional cost. It is unclear if the owner is in a position to cover that expense or whether an allowance for this work would be added to the CPA application amount. Based on my site visit to the property, there may be substantial additional work required. There is visible wood rot in the roof cornice, which I believe the property owner has already addressed outside of the CPA request. And evidence of some deterioration to the brick foundation. Without an historic structures report, it is difficult to know the full scope of work needed to restore this house. So the suggestion that our consultant is giving, which I think is really the next step that is needed for this project, this is the damage to the brick foundation that he refers to, is to undertake a study of the building conditions, to complete a building conditions assessment for this property that would tell us in more detail exactly what is needed to be done. Oh, and I did, if the file opened, I wanted to just show what the estimate was that was given by the Minuteman contractor who she received the estimate from. So the windows alone were estimated at $90,000 and an additional $75,000 to install the windows. But as pointed out in the memorandum provided by Eric Gray, the historic preservation consultant, that does not include any repair that is needed just to be able to install the windows, which could be considerable, and we don't know what it is. So a building conditions assessment provided by an architect or a contractor who has the qualifications to be able to meet the Secretary of Interior standards could provide us with the information that's needed to properly obtain an estimate for the work that's required for this property. And the suggestion, having talked this over with staff in OSPCD, with Sarah White, as well as Alan Inacio and other staff we've had conversations with, we feel that an appropriate approach might be to use CPA administrative funds to commission a building conditions assessment for this property, which could enable the homeowner to then either apply in the regular funding round next year, or potentially, depending on the timing of our being able to get the building conditions assessment, she could potentially apply as a emergency off-cycle application, given the severity of the condition of the windows and the water that's coming in that is continuing to damage the property. So what I was going to suggest was to request that the committee authorize the city staff to use CPA administrative funds to be able to carry out a building conditions assessment.
Hi, Tatiana here.
Yes.
This is probably a misunderstanding on my part, but my general understanding was that emergency authorization funding could only be used for an existing CPC funded project. And this would be money for the assessment would be coming out of CPC administrative funds. Is that, I'm assuming you've checked, we can do that legally?
We can. There isn't a rule that emergency funds could only be used on already funded projects. So first, I think there are two, your question perhaps is conflating two situations. An emergency off-cycle application would be somebody coming to the CPC asking for consideration for a project application that falls outside of the regular funding cycle, because there's some pressing need for that project to be initiated before the funding would normally become available in the regular funding cycle. Then in this case, what we're asking for is not emergency, but it's administrative funding, which is so there's a process for that the city has applied in the past for certain projects that require some advanced study to be able to apply for feasibility studies to support an application where an applicant has a project that needs more background analysis before their application is ready. And in the past, feasibility study funds have been made available out of the CPC's administrative budget. And I think that what we're asking for in this situation is comparable to that feasibility study situation.
Okay, thank you. That did clear up a couple things for me.
Okay.
This is Rose. And I apologize if this is in the report. But is there the possibility that the Historic Commission has the chunk of money that the Historic Commission has, not the CPC funds, not directly from the CPC, but through the Historic Commission, that those funds could be used to fund this?
Yes, what you're referring to is the local historic district small grant program, which I will be coming to you hopefully next month with an update on the small grant program. We've been working over the past few weeks or a couple of months to finalize the program guidelines so that we can officially launch that program, which although it was funded in the FY 2016 funding round, it has not officially launched yet because the program guidelines have not been finalized. So we're working on launching that, and we did actually discuss that as an option of using the small grant program to fund the need for this house. And our consensus among the city staff is that the nature of this project falls more in line with the feasibility study kind of situation, or follows the precedent more of a feasibility study that would support a CPA application, whereas the local historic district small grant program is intended for actual construction projects rather than a background analysis. And
I think also just to add to that, Roberta, that because that has a limited ceiling on it, that small grant with a one-time shot, that could be used, I think, quite effectively if any rot was found or some foundation work was required, up to about $15,000. So I think that's where that could kick in. But the rest of it, I think, makes sense from looking at this. This is a very valuable property. This is the second oldest building in Somerville. Magoon has written in the ceiling on it. It's his signature's there in plaster. Adams lived there and his family, and it's post and beam. It's a rather remarkable structure, regardless of how they've messed up the back of it, which, as you could see, had sort of some sort of overhanging add-on, a wart, as it were. But the rest of the place is rather wonderful. And no, Trish Matthews doesn't have the funding to be able to be a good steward to this property, but it's something that the city can't afford to lose.
Thank you for that, Alan. Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to add that in terms of the amount of funding that we'd be looking for the feasibility study, I have not, in the time that I've up until this meeting, been able to get a definitive estimate of what it would cost to do this. But just based on prior CPA project that was comparable to this, my rough guess is that $15,000 would be sufficient as an outside high-end estimate. So I would be asking to be authorized to use up to $15,000, but I expect that it's going to require much less than that to be able to complete this study. But to be authorized to use up to $15,000 for the feasibility study or for the conditions assessment.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
This is Rose again. So is there, so there wouldn't be any kind of a deed restriction based on this because it's
Not as a
that right?
result of this study, of the conditions assessment, but when the program funds are used for the actual repairs to the house or replacement of the windows, then a permanent deed restriction would be required, preserving the house, the preservation restriction in perpetuity.
Well, it is also on the National Register.
Yeah.
Other comments or questions?
Seems like a good idea to me.
You want to make a motion, Alan?
Sure, I'd like to move that we allocate up to $15,000 for a historic investigation into restoration needs for the Magoon Adams house at 438 Broadway.
This is Heather, and I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. All right, Eleanor?
Yes?
Okay, thank you. Tatiana?
Yes.
And Rose?
I abstain.
Okay. And Rebecca?
Yes.
And David?
Yes.
And I'll go down as yes. And that's everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
I do have just a question of process because I'm so new to this. Is this normally how things come to us in the way, or is this an unusual sort of circumstance for kind of a preservation of a property?
This is unusual, but this is an unusual house, an unusual circumstance that the house is in. So the city has in the past assisted or entertained applications from private property owners for historic preservation improvements to their homes or businesses. And there's been one instance to date where the CPC has allocated funding for a preservation project, a small preservation project on a private home. But this is the first situation in which the homeowner has needed this level of assistance to be able to identify what is the work that needs to be done on the house. And I think that
But it's a third party that'll be doing the work, that'll be doing the study. Because I noticed in the proposal you put before us, which didn't include, I guess, a lot of the additional repairs that he thought, it appears that the owner is the contractor. I mean, so he's kind of paying himself to do the work.
oh, no.
That was it wasn't on the thing. It looked like the owner was getting $100 an hour for something.
No, that was just the contractor who, so the owner of this house is Patricia Matthews, who you weren't with the committee in the fall. She submitted an application. She submitted a pre-application, an eligibility determination form in the summer, and was working on an application for the fall. And because having received this memorandum, we decided that we just were not going to be able to obtain enough information for her to be able to participate in the funding round for this fall. So the documents that I showed, the first memorandum was from our historic preservation consultant, and the second memorandum was the estimate that was provided by a contractor who the homeowner, together with the historic preservation consultant, contacted to request an estimate.
Okay, so that wasn't the owner.
That was not. No.
Okay.
And if it would be helpful, I believe still on our website, on our webpage, on the city's website, it's possible to access the applications that were posted from the fall. And so you can see the eligibility determination form that was submitted by this owner.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next on the agenda is review of the calendar for document updates.
Laura, it's Eleanor, dear. I'm going to excuse myself from this part of the agenda, and I'm going to say goodbye to everyone again.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Good night, Eleanor. Thanks for all your service.
God bless all.
Bye-bye.
Bless you, Eleanor.
So on the screen, I am sharing. Sorry, I can't navigate my way around. Go to meeting again. There we are. The calendar that, so I've developed a calendar of a process for updating our documents and procedures for over the next year. So just to give you an overview, since you haven't had the benefit of seeing this material in advance, it starts this month and it goes through the year ending in December next year. And the left-hand column is the list of documents and procedures that we need to look at changing and updating over this year. And on the right-hand column is the application cycle. And right now, the application cycle as it is in this document is the application cycle essentially that we've done over this past year, just repeated again next year. So one of the things that I'd like to ask the committee about is potentially migrating the application cycle. I'll start with the right-hand column and talk about the application cycle before we move to the left. So I'd like to consider migrating the application cycle by maybe a month later, because right now this year, in November, the CPC voted on its recommendations, which then have to be sent to City Council for their approval. But your recommendations were, I submitted your recommendations to City Council as quickly as possible after the meeting. The City Council, essentially December is a lame duck session, and they don't take up a lot of new business in December, especially given that CPA recommendations typically require going to committee and then coming back to council before the council can vote on them. So that requires a month for them to be able to move through the City Council. So when the City Council doesn't receive the CPA recommendations until early December, they can't make a decision for the entire month of December. So your recommendations are actually not going to make it to a council agenda until January. So my suggestion would be to consider migrating the calendar so that you would make your recommendations in December, and then the recommendations can go to City Council in January and be voted on relatively quickly after you make your recommendations. So that's, and then if we do that, we can move all of the rest of the calendar up by 1 month, which gives us a little bit more time. Actually, as we look at the left-hand column, we can see how much we intend to cover over the next several months, and perhaps this can give the committee more time to process all of this information. So December, tonight, we're reviewing the calendar, and we're going to look at the template for the annual report and plan update, which I'll talk about next, and also review an engagement strategy for the plan update. And then over the next several months, we'll be carrying out, filling in the annual report and undertaking the engagement strategy. So the annual report, actually, I'm going to pull that up now so that we can talk about it at the same time. So in drafting a template for the annual report, I looked back at what you've done in the past year or the past couple of years. And what I observed is that there were essentially 3 different reports. There was the annual report, which was completed in March or April. And then the annual plan update, which was completed in May. And then in the fall, there was a semi-annual report, which was a PowerPoint presentation given in November. And I've provided, which you can peruse, and I think, we'll have to, you'll need obviously some time to digest the material that I've given you to be able to comment on it properly. I've provided in this document a description of what is in each of those documents. More or less a table of contents or a description of what is in those documents page by page. And I've taken the content of those 3 documents and combined them into one report. So my suggestion, my proposal would be to provide one annual report / plan update every year in the spring, which could be completed, referring back to the calendar. The final would be completed in April. Although if we migrate the application cycle, we could push that to May, so that we present the final plan and application instructions and immediately open the application cycle for people to begin to apply for funding for the next funding round at that point. So that could be in April or May. And then this update has essentially 3 sections. First is the, not counting the introduction, well, the introduction and program review. Okay, no, the introduction includes a description of CPA revenues and funding availability. So that's kind of a financial section of the report. And then there would be a program review describing all of the projects that the CPAC has carried out over the past year. And then there would be a section on funding criteria, which is project eligibility and community needs and priorities and goals for the next year. Then we would have application instructions and procedures described in the plan. Just to give an overview of the application of the plan update. Excuse me. So my suggestion would be that in January, we would review the draft survey for the public engagement and then have the survey running in February and March, closing the survey in late March. And then we would review the draft application instructions portion of the plan update. And then we would also undertake a couple of other items in January. First of all, we're going to be moving the Affordable Housing Trust to the January meeting. And at that time, we would also be reviewing the template because we talked about last fall wanting to come back and look again at the template for the Affordable Housing Trust spring report. So I had scheduled that we could come back and continue that discussion in January. So that might be something that we can do in conjunction with having the Affordable Housing Trust come for a Q&A. So that would be the January meeting. And in February, we would hold our annual public hearing. And as I mentioned, have the survey running in February. And in March, we would review the draft program areas section of the plan. So that describes the project updates and accomplishments and the goals and priorities, the community needs assessment. And then in April, we'd be presenting the final plan and application instructions and discussing the financial report and so really the first section of the plan update. So I don't know, I'm not doing a great job of describing this in a very clear manner, but the idea was to break the plan preparation into sections that we can cover over the next several months in this manner, so that by April or perhaps May, if we want to push out the calendar, we would be ready to release the plan and the application instructions and begin the next funding round. And then there's further housekeeping that we needed to talk about, and we could take that up after we launch the funding round. And the housekeeping items in particular are to review the committee appointment procedure and to potentially review draft rules and regulations for the committee, which is something that we have not documented up until now, all of the practices and procedures that the committee has made its convention in the years that this committee has existed. And then finally, it was my idea, but it's a year from now, so we'll see whether we actually come to this, decide that this is something that we want to do next year. But it's been since 2014, the CPC wrote its first community preservation plan with kind of a larger public engagement effort. And maybe it might be time next year to create a new community preservation plan with a more in-depth description of the program areas, what you've done, what the community needs are, and to have a more in-depth community engagement process, perhaps some workshops or public meetings to gather public input in the process. So that's an idea that I think we could spend time thinking about next year, if we want to pursue that. So that's my presentation. Let me know if there's anything that you wanted to come back to or discuss or suggest about how we could align the calendar.
You're going to share this with us
Yes,
on an email?
I emailed you the meeting packet, and this is in that meeting packet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So I have a comment, which is I really appreciate sort of how carefully you've sort of woven together the chunking up the report into pieces along with other work of the committee, so that that sort of happens over a period of time and is informed by, you know, the survey and other things. I just want to clarify one thing. So we have, our work has to go to City Council for review, like our recommendations do and our budget does. Is there anything in the annual plan that has to also go to city? Like, is there a City Council cycle for any of that?
I have not been informed if there is. That's a good question that I can go back and ask, although there hasn't been a normal year since CPC has been under OSPCD. And the staff who had previously overseen the CPA program are no longer with the city. So we don't have institutional memory in that respect. So I am in the process right now of going back and studying everything that I can find in the files to familiarize myself with how we got to where we are today and what have been the actual procedures that the committee has agreed on over time. There is not a statutory requirement that, so the statutory requirements are that the committee submit recommendations to the city council for funding projects and submit an annual budget to city council. So submitting the annual budget, I believe we did include in, unless I'm looking at an older version, because I know that we discussed this. Yes, the annual CPA budget is included on the calendar to be submitted to city council in April. But there is not, you know, that perhaps there has been a convention in Somerville of the CPC submitting a report to city council, but I'd need to look into what that has been. I didn't find anything so far in my records showing that that has taken place.
It's a big job going through all the old records, huh? To recreate the memory.
Yeah, it's very informative.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Looks
thank
good,
you.
Roberta.
And then one other thing that I wanted to highlight, I've added, there's a footnote at the bottom. So I've added a step in the application process, which is intent forms. So in the most recent iterations of our application instructions, we have something called pre-application, which I find really confusing to have something called pre-application and then eligibility determination form and then the applications. So I'm changing the name of the pre-application form to intent form. And whereas the pre-application forms in the past had been specifically for certain types of applicants for certain types of projects, my suggestion is that that every applicant be required to submit an intent form, which will be used for administrative purposes only. And I will use this form to determine whether the project needs to obtain HPC review, city collaboration, a feasibility study, or some other type of support before they can apply. And applicants who miss that step, because what I don't want to do is close the door on applications too early. So applicants who miss that step can still apply for funding if they miss the deadline or skip the step, but we won't be able to coordinate the extra support to ensure that the project is eligible and feasible. And that could increase the chances that they miss this application cycle, just as what happened with the Magoon House this past year. So if we had had this step in place, they might not have been required to submit a pre-application, or because they didn't know that they needed a feasibility study. So if we require it of every applicant, then it will be up to me to determine if they need extra support, not up to the applicant to make that determination. And it's at their own risk if they skip that step. We'll still accept their eligibility determination form if it's submitted on time. But as we learned, that might not be enough. So let me see if there was anything else. So what I will do is, so that we don't have to add more to the next meeting, I am going to perhaps, well, I think it's up to the committee to decide if you want to change the application cycle in the way that I'm suggesting. And if you do, I can edit the calendar to give us a little bit more time, because right now I think January in particular is going to be very packed, unless we want to move some of what I've discussed in January to February in conjunction with the public hearing. I don't know what to expect for the length of a meeting.
What's the scope of the public hearing in February?
What's that?
What is the public hearing in February?
So the CPC is required every year to hold at least one public hearing for the purpose of determining community needs. And so that's the purpose of that hearing, is our annual public input on what the needs and priorities and goals of the CPA funding should be.
So is that what dictated the allocation subsequent in the funding cycle, or not necessarily?
We collect the input from that public hearing along with other factors, which include the survey that we've taken and looking at other studies and reports that the city has prepared through other public processes, and input that we receive from the tabling events or any other public input received throughout the year, or research that's been undertaken on community needs throughout the year.
So maybe we need a motion to accept Roberta's recommended change on the calendar.
This is Rose. I'll make a motion.
I actually wanted to discuss one point on that. So I get the idea of moving it because the recommendations fall into this lame whatever cycle, the way we currently have it organized. But the option would be to either move it 1 month later or 1 month earlier, right?
That's true.
So what are the cons of moving it 1 month earlier versus 1 month later?
That didn't work well at all. I apologize for that. So moving it 1 month, moving it 1 month earlier, we would not, I'm not so I'm still trying to learn how the budget cycle works, and what information we need in order to know how much funding is available, whether the books have been closed on the accounting for the previous funding cycle, so that we know how much money can be allocated. It may be possible for us to have an answer to how much funding is available, but I think that November might be the earliest month that we know how much we can adjust the budget by. That was my logic for recommending that it go to December rather than October.
Yeah, that makes sense because there's the match that gets announced later in the fall, and that would mean that applications would be due in October.
Yes, so let me look at this. I'm going to turn off the tracking. That's what didn't work. So if I move all of the dates, then the applications are due in October, correct?
I think that's good too. Sort of hitting this like summer cycle is a little awkward where people aren't always the fall's more of a grant cycle around.
Yeah.
That the
Other
Rose,
questions
you
or
can go ahead
comments?
and move to move to accept. I'm done with my questions. If I don't know if anyone else has questions.
Others? Okay, is it something we need to vote on, Rebecca? Are we good?
Roberta. I think, yeah, you may be good. I don't know if if you feel more comfortable voting to change your application cycle, or if you just want to go along with the proposed change. So
I think it looks like a good plan. If I don't know if anyone else is hesitant, but I think it looks like a good plan.
If there's no hesitancies, I'm gonna just ask if there's any hesitancies, please say so now, because I think it looks good too. Roberta clearly put a lot of time and thought into it, and the issues raised, the way they were addressed makes sense to me. So hearing none now, I would say we accept it without a vote. I would be okay with that.
okay, and so with that, I mean, that was the one decision that I really wanted to have from the committee to help to move forward. I welcome written input from any of you when you have a chance to read the materials that I've given you this evening, to let me know if there's anything that you would like to see brought out in the plan update template. And another question is whether you really want to see a plan, an update broken up a couple of times over the year, or whether you would agree that it's sufficient to provide one annual update of everything. So what I will do is make a few more adjustments to this calendar to spread a few things out, and I'll replace the document that's in your meeting packet tomorrow.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right, so then the next.
And can you add in the PSUF presentation that we were just talking about with Louisa, that she would come back and make an open space and strategic planning sort of presentation to the committee so that everyone can be on the same page?
Yes.
Or informed?
Yes, so I'll find a time to include that in this as well. I'll just make a note. I'm not going to put it here in January, but I'll just make a note of it there so that I can remember to put that in. And so that is part of what we'd like to, when we talk about reviewing the program area section of the plan, that's something that I'd like to talk about each of these. So we'll have the Affordable Housing Trust, I think, give a presentation possibly of their spring semi-annual update. And maybe either in the same meeting or at another meeting, we can invite PSUF to likewise give an update of what their current priorities are. And that will help for us to be able to define what we see as the CPA priorities for that program area. And so we could likewise invite our historic planners to give us an idea of what they see as their priorities. So that's a good idea for the process. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about is public engagement. I'm going to open one more document to share with you on the screen. And that is annual review public engagement strategy. So what I'm suggesting for this year's annual review is that first we have an online survey, which, as I mentioned in the calendar update, I would invite you to review a draft of that survey, and we can approve language of a final survey next month. And then we can promote that survey via the city website, Facebook, our language liaisons, and our own newsletter, through committee members, each sharing with their own respective committees and other networks that you're a part of. And of course, have the survey translated. And then we could also hold events, the annual public hearing, which we can promote along with the survey. And I was suggesting that that would take place in February. Tabling at a winter's farmers market, which actually just before the meeting, I received an email signing us a date for the winter farmers market of March 19th. So I would be looking for one or more committee members to come with me on Saturday, March 19th to help with tabling at that event. And see if some of the committee members have other ideas for events that we could participate in over the winter to collect input for our annual plan. And then direct outreach to stakeholders and city staff. So I've developed, and you'll find I won't open it up right now, but you'll find in the meeting packet an organization list that I developed. I went and I updated contact information for every organization that I could find. And I've indicated on that list whether I think that they might have some specific interest that relates to CPA funding. And I think that's kind of interesting to see how many organizations we think actually own historic properties, for example, that could potentially come looking for funding to improve their historic properties, or organizations who have an interest in open space and recreation facilities. So I'll reach out to talk with organizations who have a special interest in CPA program areas, and I'll send out an informational mailing to all of the other organizations, inviting them to participate in the survey and the hearing. Other boards and committees, I'll provide some talking points for committee members to solicit input from your respective committees. And we can also speak at other boards and committees, either myself or other committee members. It may be helpful to go and reach out and attend some other committee meetings to share information about CPA and ask for input about what the needs and priorities are. And I can set up a meeting for city staff to share information about the upcoming funding round and solicit input about priority community needs. This is something that I've done in Medford, so I don't know whether Somerville has a similar need for sharing information about CPA in this way, but I'm certainly happy to set up an informational meeting during the day that city staff or organizations in the community can attend to be able to provide input outside of the public hearing. So those were my ideas. I welcome input. And I want to remind everyone, since we opened the Facebook page, very few, I think very few people have shared our Facebook page so far with their Facebook network. So please do visit the CPC's Facebook page. Let me know if you need a link to it. And if you, share it with other groups that you are a part of in Somerville, and share it with your friends so that we can let people know that our page is there and have people be aware of it so that we can use it effectively as a tool for getting information out and soliciting input from people.
Why don't you just send us all a link to it, Roberta?
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Make it easy. Thanks.
Yep. So
Good.
those were my ideas for public engagement. Let me know if there's any other suggestions that you have.
I thought they looked like good ideas. I had one idea, which was that public presentation, the public meeting.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, we've, invited past recipients to come and talk a little bit about their projects. We could do that again, but that might also be a place where folks from historic preservation or from parks come and talk a little bit about sort of their strategic thing, like big, high elevation ideas about what's going on and what's important for the city, and that along with some testimonials, that might be a way to kind of combine educating us and the public at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And Heather, just think about that. There's a thought that the different groups all work in their own little silos. Affordable housing and historic, basically live in their own little lots. Whereas that's not true. We work together. And if you look at, for instance, the Broadway House, that's something that's affordable housing, but historic, funded the windows. So the CPC is funding different projects, and sometimes it's not just individual things, but it's looking at a bigger picture. And I think that's something that I think we need to share with the public in general.
I do too, because when I was tabling this summer, the little that I did it, but people would at first they would not really understand historic preservation, and it took a little talking about how it can be a hybrid project and all the ways in which it is sort of a community asset, that they would be like, oh, well, now I get it, so I think it is important to kind of explain some of the program areas to people so they have a better appreciation for how it's relevant to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did that video, Judith had worked with some students, I thought it was, test students did the eval, but she also worked with a group that was pulling a video together.
Yeah, I think the video is actually prepared by high school students, if I understand correctly. That is available on our landing page on the city's website.
Uh-huh. Maybe that should be on the Facebook page too.
That's a great idea. I haven't posted it to the Facebook page, but I can do that.
Yeah, and maybe we could get, I don't know, when you put on cable TV, right, the local stations, they just cycle through announcements or NPR news or whatever. I wonder if there's a way to reach out to the staff there and, you know, get them to play it. Really, they don't necessarily have scheduled things on every slot. They have a lot of soccer games. I've checked it out because my son played soccer. But there's like not necessarily a whole lot, and sometimes it's just like written announcements about upcoming events, and the video would be perfect material for the 2 local cable stations, I bet.
Yeah.
Maybe reach out to the new director, whose name I don't remember now, but
Okay, that's a great idea. So that could be part of advertising for the annual public hearing, to share that video, perhaps with an introduction saying that we'll be holding an annual hearing to collect community input. Great.
yeah. All right. So I think we're up to other business. I'm thinking we just had a lot of business. Probably there shouldn't be too many other bullet points, right, Roberta?
I think that, let me just check to make sure that I didn't have any notes that I haven't hit on today. Nope. Covered everything that I have for you tonight.
All right. Great. So next meeting is Wednesday, January 26th at 6:30, virtual still. And with that, I think somebody should make a motion to adjourn. And second it. Alex,
I'll second that. Yep.
okay. Who made the motion? Because I can't.
Oh, this is Rose. I'll make a motion.
Cool. All right. So we had Rose, Ellen, Heather.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay. Tatiana
Yes.
and Rebecca
Yes.
and David.
Yes.
Okay. So 8:41, according to my computer. I'm going to call the meeting over. Thank you all.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you all.
Yes, likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good holiday month, everybody. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.